Good morning, everybody. It's Daniel. We're just going to wait for a few more people to come in. We're also live streaming on our On the Block Facebook page for those of you who are there. We'll get started in just 1 minute.
Not working.
Okay, everybody, good morning. Thank you for bearing with us. We've got two computers going on side by side, but only one microphone, so things don't get all echoey. I'm Daniel. I'm here with Katie. I'm going to turn my video on in a second. Once again, we are live streaming on our On the Block Facebook page as well. If you're there, hello. If you're here, hello as well. We are going to be talking today about online real estate auctions. So let me just turn my video on so this isn't so impersonal. All right, where am I? If I'm here. For whatever reason, no, there we are. Oh, we are here. I was looking at the wrong screen. The wonders of technology. Even after 2 years of being stuck at home, we still are working that stuff out. So once again, I'm Daniel Steinfeld. I've got Katie just across from me here. We're with On the Block Realty and On the Block Auctions. And we're speaking today about real estate auctions, specifically an auction that we do have coming up this Wednesday at 1183 Dufferin Street. It is a 2-story loft, 1+1. And if you've had a chance to see it already, that's great. If you've booked a showing, also great. If you're just curious about auctions, that's good too. But we're not going to be focused too much on the specifics of the unit unless you've got questions about that. This is more about the process for everybody who might not have experienced one of our online auctions or a real estate auction. It's obviously a very new concept in Ontario, definitely. We're the only brokerage that has been doing it in a way that is actually abiding by regulations and approved by RICO, and we've done about almost 20 of these right now, and they all go uniquely and differently as every listing would. I'm going to share my screen because it's probably better to look at what we're going to talk about rather than my mug, but by all means, you set up your view however you see fit. So in a second now, you should see here, all right, you should see here otbauctions.com, which is our auction website. It is the home base for all the auctions that we run. It is also where you can find our current auction right now. You can see the ticker on the top there. And we're going to get into that as well. But before I get started, you can see if you're on either Facebook or on the Zoom call, there is a chat room, and Katie's just posted in there. It's a great place to ask any questions you have. I will preempt any questions you have by saying I hope to cover virtually all of the questions we typically get about auctions. We're going to walk through every step of the process, but by all means, please jump in and ask questions in real time. She will be responding to you in the chat in real time. And if there's anything that maybe I haven't gotten to, or as we're going, if I skip over anything, by all means, I'll talk about it here as well. So we're going to get started right now. First off, On the Block Auctions and On the Block Realty, just so we kind of understand the context of how this is all working. On the Block Auctions is our auction house. It is a licensed auction house that acts as a third-party service effectively to brokerages. Obviously, we make use of it as On the Block Realty, which is our brokerage, but we have offered our auction platform out to other brokerages who have wanted to auction their properties. So if you are a realtor who's thought about auctioning and wondering how it can work, by all means, you can give us a shout, and hopefully we can have a chat about how all that works. But that is kind of the mechanism of how these auctions do work. So this listing, for all intents and purposes, and all of our listings are traditional listings in every sense. So they are all the things that you're used to. If you have gone on MLS, I mean, it's there in terms of the marketing of the properties, in terms of the process of showings and all those things. Everything is consistent with what you've been used to, with the big exception being the actual process of arriving at a price, which is done in a transparent fashion using the auction platform. So if you are going to participate or watch, it is a fun process. It's definitely something that we've found that buyers and their agents do enjoy because of the transparency that it provides. And even those who don't win but participate, it gives you some comfort about knowing exactly where the price is in real time, going to the maximum number that you're comfortable going without feeling like you've overpaid, but also being able to tap out without wondering if you had a big enough number or if things weren't exactly as you thought they were. So we're going to jump right in right now. Again, I'm at otbauctions.com. That is the auction site. That is where all the auctions that we run are posted in real time. You can see here, you can either click on the homepage on current auctions when you get there, which will list out all the auctions we have going, or at the top, as auctions are available, there's a ticker here that'll give you it will flow through them. Right now, the Dufferin auction is the one we have that's live. As more get announced, those would be going through there, kind of scrolling across, and they give you an idea of how many days until the actual auction begins. Once the bidding starts, the ticker will still be up there, but it'll just tell you how much time is left in bidding before the auction itself is closed. So if I were to click view now, this will go straight to the auction. If I click current auctions, that would give you a bit more of like a realtor.ca kind of view with a map and all the auctions that we've got on the go. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to click view now, and that's going to bring us right to the auction page. Okay, so I'm here on the auction page as you would be as a first-time visitor to the page. You can see that there's a button at the top here that says log in, register. We will get to that. You do still have, as you can see, access to a lot of the information without having to do anything but visit the page. That goes for you as a realtor. If you're here as an interested bidder, who you might be here as well as a non-realtor, this is the same thing for everybody. This isn't a locked site, but there are a lot of features to it, even before you've registered, that I want to walk through, that you could just get a feel for what it is we're looking at here. If you are familiar with online auction platforms, like eBay is obviously the most prevalent one, a lot of the ways this works, a lot of the display is similar and works in a similar functionality to the way those work. So I will speak referring to those kinds of platforms a bit, but I'm going to try to break it down as well for those of you who have never used one before, just so you have an idea of how that might all work. You can see here along the top, there is a bit of a scroll bar. You can go through pictures of the property if you'd like. You can look at things. They are available much larger below. You can zoom in, zoom out, that sort of thing. So this has the feel of what might be a property page. Again, this is also on MLS. All of our listings are as well. You've got a bit of a what would you call it? I guess a menu at the top that will lead you to different parts of the page if you want to skip ahead. But the most important things on the page generally are going to be this section right here, and a couple things as we go farther down. So the current price right now is the same as the MLS price, which is also the starting bid of the auction. So the MLS price represents the starting bid, which is $699,000. That will not change until such time as somebody bids more than that. That price, though, once the auction begins, and only once the auction begins, will change as bids come in. It will in real time adjust, and we're going to show you what that looks like in a bid and actually do an auction so you could see it. But this is where you can keep track, and your clients can keep track of what the current price of a property is, so that you can gauge interest as to whether or not you would like to go higher, whether it's gone beyond where your comfort level is. It gives you the opportunity to make decisions based on real data that's right in front of you. The timer right now, it's saying right now the bidding is starting in 2 days, 6 hours and 19 minutes. That's changing also in real time. And that's tied to our 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time auction start, which is our standard starting time for bidding. It is this Wednesday, the 12th, when it's going to be starting. And once bidding starts, again, this will change and it will say bidding now happening, bidding ends at, and it'll be a countdown to 8 o'clock p.m. Eastern Time on Wednesday, which is when our auctions are set to close. And we'll talk more about that as well. It also says pre-bidding is now open. So this is a little bit different from preemptive offers. Now, this particular property is also considering preemptive offers that would be submitted in a traditional sense as well. The terms for why you would want to do that are pretty similar to why you might want to do that with any other type of property. We do follow all the same rules and regulations that would be associated with the preemptive offers. So if we were to receive one and the seller wanted to review it, we would notify and disclose to all interested parties who have either booked a showing or shown interest in the property. And it is possible in that sense, if it was being reviewed and multiple people came through, that it would in fact transition into a blind offer process. This auction will not be pushed back to deal with preemptive offers that might come in. Usually on these properties, we don't see a great deal of preemptive offers because people want to just participate in the transparent nature of the auction. However, it is something that's available for this. The pre-bidding, and you can see here, it also says bidding has not yet started. In the meantime, we are accepting pre-bids in advance of the auction. A pre-bid is basically your way of logging your bid before the auction has even opened. Let's say you're not going to be available, your client's not going to be available on Wednesday throughout the process. But you want to make sure that you put a bid in there so that you've got a shot at the property. You can put in any pre-bid right now, which is just a number, and it will be saved, encrypted, not seen by anybody. And effectively, any pre-bids that may have been made prior to the start of the auction will show up the moment the auction begins. So let's say you make a pre-bid of $710,000, for example, and that's the only pre-bid that came in before the auction. At 5 o'clock on Wednesday, this current price will open at $710,000, representing the highest pre-bid that was received, and it will say that there's been one bid placed, and the auction will continue as it would have. If there's multiple pre-bids, this current price will represent the highest of the pre-bids that will be made or that were made, and it will show the number of bids that were made as well. The identities of all bidders throughout the auction process is protected. None of that is disclosed. Just the price, the number of bids, and the times that the bids were placed. And I'll get into the bidding process to give a little bit more information about what the pre-bid or the bid will look like as we go through the process. The other buttons here are pretty standard things that you're probably used to if you've gone on any real estate site. You can submit a question, which will come directly to us as a question about the property or about the process. Effectively, we'll just fill out an email form that allows you to ask the question. You can add it to a watch list, which is more tied to if you've actually registered on our site and you want to be notified more about properties that are part of the process. Or if you are wanting to book a visit to the home, this is more for people who might not have an agent. I'm going to click that and show you. If you do click that, you're able to fill out a visit date. But if somebody is currently working with another realtor and they check that off, it will immediately tell them to have the realtor book the showing, because we don't want to be going into that sort of thing. And we don't want people privately booking things and going behind realtors' backs or anything like that. So we do pre-qualify people that way, and we'll get into realtor representation as well as we go forward. As we go down, there's just a lot of descriptive text here. This is a lot of the stuff you might see on MLS. The auction platform does allow for more robust information than what Realtor or what Stratus or Realtor.ca will allow. So in some cases, you might see more characters, more things written in here, more pictures, more media. But ultimately, this is the description of the property, a bunch of the details. You can see that when it comes to the rooms, it's not just kind of standard point form bullet points about each room. We put a little bit of a narrative about them. But again, this is just a way to inform people about the property in different ways. If there is any media, whether it's a 3D tour, whether it's a video, things like that, that's all available as well. And this is all available, again, without having to log in or register or anything like that. This is your kind of 10,000 foot view of the home and the process without having to do anything else. You can see under documents, it does say though, log in or register to view documents. So this is what the next step will be if you do want to dig a little bit deeper into the property. Even if you're not going to bid, if you want to get some more specific information, it does require you to register on the site. And that's for either the realtor or the buyer or both registering on the site. And we'll get into the registration process in a second and show you what that unlocks for you. Just to round this out, the rest of the information here, again, is pretty generic. You've got your map view. You've got ability to look at all the pictures, blow them up if you want. You can dig in deeper to them if you'd like. And then the very high level but necessary information about this particular auction. The key thing about our auctions is that you are competing on price and price alone. We don't want to, and it doesn't make sense to muddy the waters with too many different moving parts of the variables that can go into an offer. For example, conditions, deposit amount, closing date, and the price are all different variables that can make a particular offer better or worse depending on the priorities of the seller. For the auction to run effectively, everybody's seeing the price change, but you need to be confident that everybody participating is playing according to the same rules. And so these are the terms that are associated with this particular auction. And it might change, and it does change with every auction we do based on the particular property. For this particular auction, again, this is a new build and it's direct from the builder. So the terms are a little bit different from what you might see in a resale property, but they're very consistent with what you would see in a purchase from a new builder. In this case, the deposit is preset at just $5,000 within 1 day of the accepted offer. This is all done the same way as you'd be used to. Bank draft, it's addressed in this case to the builder's lawyer, which again is consistent with the new build process. For most of the auctions we do, they're resales, so that same thing would happen. It would just be addressed to our brokerage. The additional deposit, which again is part of the new build terms and what's in the builder agreement, is 5% of the purchase price will be due 30 days after the acceptance. So if you were to have a closing date of, let's say, I don't know, April 30th, but on January 12th, the deal is accepted, on January 13th, $5,000 is due as the initial deposit. And then 30 days later, so I guess that would be February 11th, or sorry, February 12th would be 30 days, no, February 11th. February 11th. On or around that date, 30 days though, is when the additional 5% would be due. Let's say the final price was $750,000. The 5% would represent $37,500, if my math is right, as an additional deposit due, this in the same fashion that the first deposit was due. The closing date is one thing that actually, as a bidder, you've got flexibility here. Again, this is dictated by the seller, and typically we'd like them to give people the opportunity to have a window so they can choose something, and it's not mandated to be a particular date. If the seller wishes, it might be a particular date that they require. In this particular case, you can choose any date greater than 30 days from acceptance. So again, February 11th, I believe, up to 120 days closing. And so that's a pretty wide window. It's fair to say that everybody can and would fall within that window. That being said, if you have a client who is looking for a different date, all we ask is that you reach out to us ahead of time. You ask the question, you tell us what the terms are that you are looking for with a closing date. We can talk to the seller in any of our auctions. And if in fact that's something that's acceptable, we will make adjustments as necessary to the closing date that's acceptable, because again, that would be a term that would be offered to everybody. In this particular case, this is such a wide range. It's hard to think that anybody would fall outside of that, but that is something that you can be aware of when you're doing that. Now, the pre-authorization hold, this is a very important concept, and you can see it says not charged. This represents 0.5% of the starting bid of our auctions. What the pre-authorization hold is, it is for anybody who registers as a bidder and bids in our auction. Part of the bidder registration, which we're going to look at, involves registering with a credit card. The credit card is not charged. It's used in part to verify identity, to prevent fraud. And in this particular case, there's a hold put on the card in the amount of 0.5% of the starting bid, much in the same way as if you were to go to a hotel and they put a hold on your card for damages. That's the idea here. There's a hold put on your card because in the unlikely and never before happened event that somebody were to make a bid that they don't intend to go forward with, or they make a bid that's exorbitantly high and a phony bid, and it effectively throws off the whole auction, the auction house reserves the right to charge that pre-authorization as a penalty for that person. So it's effectively a deterrent that's prohibitive enough to ensure that nobody is going to make any bids they don't intend to keep. Again, it's never happened in any of the auctions we've run because of a system like this. But it is there as protection to give peace of mind to everyone who's participating, that there's nothing being done that's offside or nothing that's being done that isn't real. Again, all of these are factors that you might run into in a bidding war, blind bidding process that you're familiar with right now, right? People don't do these sorts of things. They don't make fake bids or anything like that, but we add an extra layer of protection here that if anything were to be done that isn't consistent, we can address that. The additional terms wherever necessary are listed down here. So in this case, it says here the sales directly from the builder. All terms of sale are currently explained in the attached builder agreement. Please ensure you review terms as these are the purchase documents to be executed by the successful bidder. Bids may be placed in advance of the auction by logging in with a maximum bid. In the event of any such pre-bid, the leading bid will be visible on the opening bid on auction night, and preemptive offers will be considered. So these are all the things I covered earlier on there. And then it makes reference to the fact that the full auction terms are in the auction documentation attached. So this is where we talk about documentation once again. So we've gone through, that's the entire auction site, and most of it will look like the information you're familiar with. We're going to get into the meat of the auction right now. I'm looking for synonyms I don't have. And so to do that, you just need to register on the site. And there's two types of registration. So I'm just going to click here. And now I do have my own account, but if you don't have an account, you're going to press sign up. And again, this can be you as a realtor. This can be you as a bidder. It can be both. There's nothing here that requires you to do anything other than, I'll show you here. You first are going to acknowledge whether or not you're working with a realtor. If you are a realtor, say that you're working with a realtor. If you're not working with a realtor, and this is very important for both those of you who aren't a realtor right now, or those of you who are and are wondering how this works, if someone were to click that, there's a very clear disclaimer that comes up. It is not our intention, and we don't want to be entering into multiple representation situations through this. The platform does allow for people to bid without a realtor. However, these terms here are very clear about what the requirement is of somebody who's trying to work in an unrepresented fashion. There's a couple of things that are important. Typically, people who want to work on their own are doing it because they feel they're going to get some sort of a deal, that there's some sort of preferential treatment, discounts and commissions, things like that. The nature of the auction is such that there are no collateral agreements on the listing side, meaning there will not be and there cannot be any discounts to commissions, any separate deals, anything like that that will put someone who's not represented in a better position. For all intents and purposes, it puts them in a worse position because this also lays out that they will be required to execute a customer service agreement. The listing brokerage in any auction will not have a client relationship with unrepresented bidders, and as such, the customer service provided to you is restricted to the services required to fulfill the transaction, yet not with any fiduciary duty relationship with the listing brokerage. So we do everything we can to make sure unrepresented buyers are understanding they're not at an advantage to go that way. And in fact, it makes more sense to go out and find their own real estate professional to work with. So if they'd like to continue, we do allow that, but we make it very clear about what the terms of that continuing is. That's there to protect them and their interests, but also to protect all the other participants and other realtors who might be wondering what's happening with people who are unrepresented. That's what's happening with them. And they would go onto the same registration page as the other side would if they were to click I confirm. If you are working with a realtor, you go directly to the account creation page. Now, there's a very base level of information that's required to create an account. It's basically first and last name, email address, and create your own password. Because you've identified you're working with a realtor, you do identify your agent's name and their email at a minimum. This is so when your client opens an account, or if it's yourself, opens an account, the realtor is notified immediately that their client has opened an account and they're locked in here. It also ensures that we're aware of who's representing who as they're on the site, so that should that bidder or should that person be a successful bidder, we know who it is that this deal is cooperating with, which I will get to cooperating and how that all works and who should be bidding and all that in a bit. So that's all the information that's required here. You can, as a realtor or as the person or as the client, enter the agent's phone number and brokerage name here. It's not required, but at a minimum, we do require the name and email address so that we can keep those people informed about what's happening. If you are the realtor, obviously put your own name and your own email address and as much information as you're comfortable putting. In order to move on, the terms and conditions here, these are the terms and conditions of the site itself. These aren't auction terms. So if I were to click on that, hopefully you can see that pop up on your screen, but these are general auction terms, or sorry, not auction terms, website terms. So these are just things that talk about our responsibility of confidentiality of information. And you're welcome, obviously, to look at that, but this is very boilerplate stuff that doesn't have anything to do with the substance of the auction itself, but just the terms and conditions of the website. Once you've selected that, you have the option. If you'd like future updates with our newsletter, that's a newsletter that is basically sending out future auctions that are coming out, things like that. It's not really spammy. You're welcome to sign up. No problem if you don't, all good. And then if you want to stop right there, you can complete your basic registration and you're done. Your basic registration is all you need to unlock documents and all those sorts of things. So to have full access to all the information on the site, all you need is a name and an email address, in effect, okay? If you wanted to proceed to the bidder registration, meaning you're pretty sure you're going to be bidding on an auction, this isn't tied to any particular auction necessarily, but it creates an account that will then prompt you for a bit more information. Once again, it will ask you for, among other things, credit card, where it's going to verify that you are who you say you are, that the name and address all tied to the credit card. It will also do a two-factor SMS authentication, again, tied to authorizing that you are who you say you are, and that we're ensuring that we're getting ahead of fraud prevention. No one's pretending to be you, anything like that. And in doing that, it will create a bidder account for you, but it's just a bit more information that goes through that, which I'm not going to go straight to that right now, but you can, by all means, even if you do the basic and you create a bidder registration, you'll see what goes in there. But that's all that you're really going to see there. And that effectively is what you need to do when you're ready to bid on a property. I do recommend, if you know you're going to bid, don't create the bidder registration or the bidder account at 7:30 in the evening on auction night, because should you run into any problems, whether it be with a credit card, whether it be with your authentication, you don't want to be dealing with tech problems that could actually keep you from having a bidder account and keep you from bidding before the timer runs out. So as you know you're going to bid, make sure that you are actually getting that account set up in advance of the auction, whether it's now, whether it's tomorrow, whatever. None of this information obviously is seen by us. It's all encrypted. Everything is done with full security. So by all means, if you've got questions about that process, let me know. I can see there's some questions in the chat, but I think Katie's dealing with them. Okay, great. Okay, so once you've got a basic account, I'm just actually going to go back to the auction right now, and I'm just going to log in with a basic account that I've got. Not this one. Okay. Now you all know my Gmail account. Okay, now I'm logged in with a basic, actually this is a bidder account because pre-bidding is open, but with the exception of this bidding spot, everything else is what you'd see with a basic account. And I'll tell you how the pre-bidding works as well, because we happen to have that here. All my passwords, geez Louise. Okay, you can see here that everything looks the same, but now there are some documents available to you. That is the one big difference you're seeing with the basic account here. Everything else is exactly the same, but now that you've got access to documents, this will change from auction to auction. With some freehold homes, you might see surveys in here. You might see home inspections if they've been done. You might see status certificates if those are available for condos. In this particular case, it's again a brand new build from the builder. So virtually all the documentation is available in this builder agreement that covers all the necessary schedules and things you'd need. But there are two other documents we've included here, including the floor plan, which you can open or download just by clicking on it, and then the auction terms as well, which are the specific and detailed breakdown of all of our auctions and how they work and what your responsibilities are as a bidder, what the seller's responsibilities are as a seller, and what our responsibilities are as the auction house and the brokerage who are overseeing the process. If you click that, it'll download. I don't know if you'll see it. I think you will see it here. Okay, so you'll see right now standard auction terms. It's not a huge read. It's decent bedtime reading if you've got a couple days. But there's important things in here that are going to cover all the different aspects of the auction. And what's most important is this is where you start to see the differentiation between what an open auction looks like versus what some of these blind bidding wars or what the traditional approach might look like for you. I'll walk through some of these here, but then what we're going to do is we're actually going to go into an auction and show you how the process works. So you can actually see, and you have the access to do this as well. I'll tell you right now, and we can put in the chat, if you go after I'm done talking about this to demo.otbauctions.com, that's demo.otbauctions.com, that will take you to our demo site that runs 24/7. And there's always auctions happening there. And I use auctions loosely because they're not real properties, but they show you virtually all the workings and how an auction will work and how the bidding process works, with the exception of you don't need a credit card, you're not spending real money, and you're not buying a real house. So go there, take a look around. If you want to have a feel for how it works, do that. But I'm going to go there right after I talk about this as well and show you how the bidding process works as well. Okay, so a couple things to note here. By bidding on an auction, you are in effect, and you're going to acknowledge this when you place a bid, you're acknowledging that you are agreeing to the terms of the auction, meaning that you are bound to, among other things, actually executing the agreement once the auction is over, should you be the winning bidder. That's very important to note. So your bid effectively is your contract, and that's something that you are acknowledging. Some of the terms of the auction itself. One of the most important things that people need to understand is right here, the seller's reserve price. You saw that the starting bid for this particular property is $699,000. Now, we don't underprice properties in an exorbitant fashion that most people don't do either, but that you might be familiar with, where sometimes you might see a property listed at $699,000, but they're actually looking for $1 million. We ensure that we're listing close enough to the market that the bidding will actually get us there, and potentially, you know, in some region around there beyond that, if possible, for our seller. But we don't want to be creating boundaries that are going to make the auction a useless process where people are bidding to a number that the seller won't even accept. So there's what's called a reserve price. And the reserve price is the lowest number at which the seller is obligated to sell. So it is a dollar amount above the starting bid, not by much, but above the starting bid, that once it's reached with bidding, everybody will see in the auction, and we'll show you what that looks like, that the reserve has been met. And the moment the reserve price is met, it means the property is 100% going to sell at the auction. Should the reserve price not be met, the seller does have the option of accepting the high offer, because the bidder is still bound to whatever their highest offer might have been or what their highest bid might have been, but they're not obligated. So typically, and I'd say most of the time, the reserve price is met in our auctions, but in a situation where the reserve price is not met, the seller might then turn around and try to negotiate with the high bidder, or might take the top two bidders and say, okay, you saw where the bidding went, it's not where the reserve price was. Maybe we allow one more offer with a little bit more information on the table and try to get a deal done. But the reserve price itself is a number that we make sure is reasonable. We do not take an auction if somebody's expecting a number that we don't believe that the property is worth, based on comps, based on the market. And so we can't disclose that. That is the one number that you won't know until it's hit. However, we know from experience that setting a reserve price low is a benefit to the auction. For example, the last couple of auctions that we've done, the reserve price has been very reasonable. And once the reserve price is hit, people actually bid a lot more, because it gives the bidders an appropriate confidence that things are actually happening. And as I had said, yeah, the bidders are all still obligated to go forward with a transaction based on whatever bid they put forward, whether or not it is the reserve price or not. The moment you place a bid, that's a binding number to you. And so be aware of that. Even if you make a bid and it's still below the reserve price, it's possible the seller will accept that number after the auction is over. If anybody's got more questions about the reserve price and how it works, feel free to put it in the chat. So withdrawal of the property, these are sort of standard things. It's not going to happen here, but up until the auction's starting, once the auction is started, we can't take it down. We can't change things. We can't make adjustments. Once it's on, it's on. We're still in the pre-phase right now, where if our seller had a change of heart tomorrow, for example, they do reserve the right to withdraw the property from MLS, from the auction site, all those sorts of things. That's there as a term that lays that out. Cooling off rights. This usually does not apply to our auctions because all of our auctions have been resale. However, because this is in fact a new builder sale, this particular auction does come with the legally mandated 10-day cooling off period, which makes things super comfortable for everybody who's bidding. It is part of the builder agreement that you're welcome to review. But it's very important to note that this kind of takes away some of the other questions we usually get about things like conditions and stuff like that, because you are in fact getting a 10-day cooling off period where you can review with a lawyer and are encouraged to review with a lawyer the terms, the contract, and all those things. And you have the ability, not that you're going to, but you'd have the ability to walk away and receive your deposit back should you walk away within the 10-day cool off period. So that is included as part of this particular auction. In usual sense, what we do is our auctions are generally firm offers, meaning financing, inspection, all those conditions are not something that you would be entitled to when bidding on the auction. We will always do a pre-list inspection, for example, make that available for download as well. Status certificates we make available for download as well, so that all those things that might typically create a condition or a desire to have a condition are addressed ahead of time. In this particular case, it's not an issue because we have a cooling off period. The registration of bidders we did go through. It talks a little bit here about what our rights are. If somebody makes a bid that we know is not right, or if you notify us that you made a bid that was unintended, let's say you meant to put 800,000 and you put 8 million, for example, we'll know 8 million wasn't the right bid. It doesn't mean we're going to start charging you penalties. We are able, with enough lead time before the end of the auction, to cancel a bid if necessary. We also have the ability to disallow people from bidding if we have any suspicion that somebody is not a genuine bidder for whatever reason. We haven't run into that situation, but it's important to know that if that is a situation we run into, we can do that. We can't see the details of things that haven't been entered. If you've got a maximum bid, for example, we can't see what that maximum bid is. We'll only see what the leading bid is in the particular auction. As far as the protection of your identity, you're going to see when we do the demo, we don't actually, and none of the participants will see the identity of the people who are bidding, whether it's a realtor or their client. You're only going to see an encrypted username that allows people to get some sense of consistent people who might be bidding. So usually it's a 2 or 3 letter acronym with a bunch of X's after that. And what that does is, let's say towards the end of an auction, you've got 2 or 3 people bidding back and forth. In some sense, it's nice for people who are spectating to get a little entertained by who's going to bid next and seeing all that. But really, it's more there just to allow everybody to have a sense of how many people are participating without knowing who they are. Also, as we went through in the registration process, you will, or your client will, identify whatever associated realtor is associated with somebody who's registering. So if you as a realtor are bidding on behalf of your client, you would identify yourself. If your client's bidding themselves, which is recommended but not required, they will identify you as their realtor when they log in, so that you're kept on top of the process as well. Okay, bidding at auction. We're going to go through a lot of this when I actually do the demo of the bidding process. But a couple things here that you're going to want to note that are questions we get. Phony bids, shill bids are disallowed. So that is something that is actually legal in other jurisdictions. In places like Australia, it's commonplace that people might actually make bids or plant people to make bids on their auctions just to get activity going or to drive the price up. Usually that's prior to the reserve price being hit. But those are referred to as shill bids, and they're common practice. That is not something that is allowed here. That's part of our terms with our seller, meaning that our seller, anybody associated with them, anybody associated with our brokerage are not permitted to bid on the auction. So anybody who's bidding in the auction is bidding in the auction as someone who's registered as someone who's interested in it. You can rest assured that every bid that takes place is somebody who has an intent to purchase the home. And everything else here, the pre-authorization we talked about a bit. Again, the pre-authorization is not something that is charged to you, but it is a hold that's put on a credit card when you intend to bid as a protection to all participants that your bids are going to be real, that you're not going to walk away from your requirements as stated in this contract. And it is never charged. So it's something that you don't have to have any fear is being charged to you unless you actually have ill intentions, which, knock on wood, nobody has had in any of the auctions we've done, and we don't expect anybody will have. Beyond that, and by all means, ask questions as I'm skinning through here. You can also download this as well once you go to the site. Conditions are all here again, laying out the fact that there are no additional conditions that are afforded to anybody who's participating in any of our auctions. If it's not stipulated in the terms, then it's not something that's additionally available to you. If you are an individual who requires a particular condition, let's say you need a financing condition, it's a non-starter, and that's not something available in the auction. This is part of the reason as well that we offer preemptive offers as an option. That would be your window of opportunity to make any offer you want, subject to any terms you want, such as an inspection, a financing condition, anything like that, with the caveat that the irrevocable would have to be done prior to the start of our existing auction. Meaning, if Friday of last week you want to put an offer in with financing, you could do that. It would just have to be irrevocable, or sorry, not irrevocable. The condition would have to expire prior to the start of the auction, so that if we did in fact accept one and the conditions fell through, the auction could still go forward as planned. Again, any of those situations, we would still disclose to any other participating or interested parties that we do have a preemptive offer that we're looking at, and the seller reserves the right to say yes or no to whether or not they'd like to review such a preemptive offer. So that goes with any change to the standard terms you see in the auction. And that's it here. These are all just kind of standard things. Additional purchaser costs are just your standard closing costs, which we can talk about. Again, they're a little bit different with the new build as they would be with the resale. But why don't I just jump into the good stuff, which is the actual auctions themselves. So this is our auction. I'm going to go over to the demo site right now because the last thing I want to do is bid on our own auction, because I just said that's not allowed. You can see though, before I leave, pre-bidding is open. If you've got a bidder account, you can put a number here, whatever it is, and you can place that in there. It can represent your maximum bid. It can be the current price. The only stipulation for any bid you place in our auction or in the demo is that you're at the current price plus whatever the minimum increment might be. In this particular auction, it will go up by increments of $1,000 at a time. So I did receive a call earlier in the week from an agent who was asking, can I just outbid by a penny? And are we just going to be going back and forth a penny at a time until somebody gives up? We don't allow that. And that's just more for everyone's sanity rather than for us being sticklers. I think $1,000 is a reasonable increment to be able to increase by, but you can choose any number greater than that, just not less than that. Okay, so when you go to our demo site, and if you're there now, great. If not, follow along and go visit whenever. First thing you'll see is at the bottom, there's a red strip here that just reinforces the fact that this is in fact a demo. Also, all the properties are called Demo Street or Demo Boulevard. So there's a lot of key indicators in case you're nervous that you're actually buying a real house. You're not. You're also not providing any personal information that will allow us to chase you for money or anything like that. But again, you can go to the current auctions. I'll show you what that looks like. If you go to current auctions, it will show you all the different phony properties that are for sale right now. So you can see they're all ending at different times. And that's also so you can get a feel for what it looks like when an auction actually comes to be done. I'm going to look at 2 Demo Street right now. It's closing the soonest. It'll be over well after this webinar is done. But I'm going to go in there right now, and it's going to look very much like the other auction. Now I'm logged in here, and I've placed the initial bid already. You can see that I placed a bid here for 812,000, but you can also see a few other things. You can see it says the reserve is not yet met. So I know it's not met yet, meaning that if the auction closed right now, I wouldn't necessarily be purchasing the home for 812. Maybe the seller will accept it, but maybe the seller will call me and say, thank you so much for being the high bidder. You didn't meet the reserve price. Would you like to negotiate? Let's talk about it. Both possibilities. Also, it's telling me I'm the current high bidder, and it's reinforcing the fact that the reserve price hasn't been met. If you're not the high bidder, it will also tell you, hey, you're not leading this thing if you thought you were, which is important because sometimes people might make a bid, maybe they're outbid and they don't realize that they're no longer in the lead. That's important to keep track of whether you're winning or not. It also lays out the bid increments, and it tells you what the minimum bid is based on that increment. Finally, it tells me what my current maximum bid is. So in this particular case, I bid $812,000, so I'm not willing to go higher than that right now. However, another question we get asked often, which we're going to see right now, is, well, once I place a bid, do I get to try again? And the short answer is absolutely. We encourage it. We'd love you to bid often and nonstop. So if somebody outbids you, you will always have the opportunity to improve your bid. But let's say somebody were to come in here and they were to place a bid. What's going to happen to what I see on this? Oh, would you look at that? Lucky us. Somebody else bid. You can see right away the current price has changed to $815,000, and the reserve price is still not met. Okay, so I'm not the high bidder. It says you're not currently winning this property, and it's red. It's telling me that I need to do something here. You can also see here that the high bidder has changed and that there's two bids. So if I go to view history on here, it'll show me, here are the two bids that have been made. Here's when they were made. And you can see that the bidders themselves are X'd out on here. So let me just go back and okay. So here's where we're at. I now have the option of doing several things. I can either say, you know what, 812 was my max. That sucks. I know someone else has bid more, so I give up. Oh, someone else has bid now. Okay, that's great. It might be one of the people watching this webinar. Someone else has bid $820,000. The reserve is still not met, and I'm still in a position where now I'm saying, okay, my minimum bid now is 822. But let's say I want to say, forget this. I have a maximum of, I don't know, I have a maximum of $910,000. And I don't want to be sitting here just watching as this thing piddles its way up. I also want to see if my max is even the reserve price or not, or am I just barking up the wrong tree? So I'm going to put in 910,000 here, and I'm going to place a bid. Now, this is a very dumbed down version or simplified version of what this will look like when you're really bidding. You will still have to confirm it, make sure it's the right number, but this is also the step where you will verify that it's the right account. It will also verify that you're accepting the terms once again of the auction that you're participating in, and it will reinforce a couple more things. It will reinforce the pre-authorization hold that is not put on your card until you actually bid on a property. So it'll just tell you in this other auction, $34.95 is being pre-authorized on your card. It'll make sure it can do that. And it'll just basically give you several more steps to acknowledge prior to submitting your bid, because you are really clicking a button to potentially buy a house. So I'm going to submit here my bid of $910,000. Okay, look what happened here. Few things. First of all, the reserve is now met. So we know this house is going to sell, which is fantastic. We also know that I'm right now in the lead to win this property, which is also fantastic. But more things have happened. If you're noticing here, my $910,000 is not the current price that anybody's seeing, inclusive of the seller, inclusive of the other bidders, inclusive of our brokerage. I'm the only one who knows that as the bidder. It's down here as my current maximum bid. So I'm protected right now to my maximum bid. However, this platform will only require me to pay the minimum I need to pay to win the property. In this particular case, because the reserve price was apparently $845,000 here, it has bid me up to just that amount, because it's going to, in any of our auctions, it's going to take somebody's bid up to the reserve price, but not beyond that unless they need to outbid somebody else. So in this particular case, because the reserve price was $845,000, that's what my bid is right now. But should anybody else place a bid and it's below my maximum bid, this system will automatically outbid them by the minimum increment. So by $2,000 in this case, in our auction, it'll be $1,000, by $2,000 to keep me in the lead until such time as somebody outbids my maximum. So this does a few things. First of all, it allows you, again, to not have to sit there and keep guessing and going bit by bit. You can be confident that if there's a number you're comfortable with, just put it in there, because you're not necessarily going to be required to pay it. But the other thing is, if in fact somebody does outbid your maximum bid, you're going to be notified about that as well. Now, you'll be notified with an email. However, my strong recommendation is that you're paying attention to the auction, especially as it nears its finish, because you don't want to just be relying on maybe an email is going to come. You're buying a house here. It's kind of a big deal. You're going to want to be paying attention, at least as things come to a close. You'll also see here in the history, all anybody sees is what your bid is here. Okay, they're not going to see, nobody sees that your maximum bid was 910. It's not important to anybody else who's participating. Well, they'd love to know, but it's not information that they're entitled to. And so you're 100% protected by that number here. Let me just refresh here. I'm just going to, Katie stepped away, but I'm just going to place a bid. Oh, she's here. So Katie's just going to place a bid now to outbid me. Let's say she was to bid, she goes, okay, 845, I'm going to bid 850,000 because this guy's at 845, I can do better. So she's going to bid 850, and look what happened. Okay, her bid went in, but I'm still the high bidder. Okay, it automatically outbid her high bid by the minimum increment, which is 2,000. And you can see in the history, it shows that the bid came in for 850,000, but it automatically also shows that my bid came in to beat her by an extra 2,000. That's because I already had my what's called a proxy bid in there, but really it doesn't matter what it's called. It's basically, it's an automatic outbidding. It was a new maximum that I've got that I'm protected to. So this will keep going, but let's say she says, all right, I'm actually willing to spend $925,000 on this. So she bids 925,000, and all of a sudden, oh crap, I'm not in the lead anymore. And what did it do? It outbid my maximum. So it only put her to the max or to the minimum she needed to be in the lead. She's now protected to 925,000, and I've been notified that I'm not winning anymore, and I have the option of outbidding her. The important thing here is that when you're putting in a maximum number, you're not going to be spending that maximum number unless somebody else actually bids up to that number. Nobody knows what that is, and you're protected. It saves you time, all that sort of thing. Okay, another key difference, the only key difference between this and an online auction, and a question we always get in a situation we've run into with most of the auctions we've run, is, okay, online auctions, I can just wait until the last second and I can bid whatever the winning bid is and I'll just win it then, right? Not in this case. The way that our platform works is if anybody places a bid in the final 3 minutes of the auction, so when this clock here is down to 3 minutes or less, if a bid comes in, the clock adds an additional 3 minutes to the clock. Okay, the auction site does that. The reason for that is twofold. Number one, obviously, in the best interest of the seller, we'd like to see as many bids as possible, and we don't want to just cut things off when the timer runs out. But number two, and arguably more importantly, we also don't want buyers who intend to go higher to feel like they were screwed out of placing the bid they were willing to place just because somebody had a fast internet connection, right? So we want to make sure everyone has the ability to put whatever bid they want, to continue bidding if they choose to until they're done. And everybody will be able to do that because you'll see what the current price is. You know everyone is abiding by the same terms. And so due to that, we want to make sure, or because of this clock thing, that it ensures that everybody has the opportunity to have as much access and as much available time to make the decision they want to make. Our recommendations for participating in this, there's a few of them. First of all, one of the questions we get is, as a realtor, should I be bidding on this or should my client be bidding on this? And I mentioned earlier, you're both able to. It's allowed for a realtor, I'd say, and about 50% of our bids come from the realtor direct, 50% come from their clients. The risks you need to be aware of if you're a realtor bidding on behalf of your client is that the way the agreement is written, if you are registering and bidding on your client's behalf, you are the one liable to actually purchase the property should your client change their mind. So let's say you're bidding, realtor John Smith is bidding for his client, Jill Taylor. Jill Taylor's she's on the radio or something. I think she's the weather girl on 680. Anyway, you're bidding on behalf of your client, Jill Taylor, and you win the property right here. You win it for $912,000. And then you say to Jill, okay, we won it. It's fantastic. Let me send over the builder's agreement. We're just going to authenticate all this, get it done. And Jill says, I'm out, forget it. You are still on the hook to buy the home because you're the name that was signed up. It's your credit card that's tied to it. You might run the risk of being penalized if you walk away. Again, none of this has ever happened, but that's the liability that you take on as an agent bidding on behalf of your client. Provided you've got an understanding and a trust of your client, which most of us do, there's nothing wrong with it, but just be aware that that is the risk you take for bidding on their behalf. Again, if the client bids on their own behalf, they are the name that is associated with the deal from the get-go. They are identifying you as their realtor from the beginning, so you are kept on top of the process in real time as well. And conceivably, you're still in constant communication, maybe over a Zoom call on the phone, just because of the world we're in right now. You're keeping track of what's happening, but you can see online as well. And your role as the person providing them with the advice and the guidance and what to do does not change in that sense either, but it is up to you. The process, once the auction is over, is pretty simple, and it's, again, very similar to a traditional process. Effectively, when the auction is over, that has now dictated what the terms of the auction are. In this case, the only variable that would be in this auction is the closing date, because we do give a window of 30 to 120 days. So at that point, you as a realtor will give us a shout, or we'll obviously reach out and say, you won, congratulations. What's the closing date that you're looking for within that window? You'll tell us, and we will just then populate the agreement that's already available online for you to look at with all the details. And really, it's just going to come down to your client's name, the purchase price that was arrived at in the auction, and the closing date. All the other terms are standard, and you know those all already. And it would be sent, and immediately it would be immediately signed by your client. We do typically an irrevocable of that evening, not very long thereafter, to ensure that everything's done that night and firmed up that night. All that is executed, and we're done within a day, because in this case, it's a deposit of $5,000. I'll go back to the main site. Because it's a deposit of $5,000 that's due within 1 business day, that would be all that is necessary on your end once the auction is over. And then in this case, again, the 10-day cooling off period would be triggered right away, as would the 30-day clock for the 5% deposit due 30 days later. All the rest of the process is exactly the same as if you were to buy this directly from the builder. And I'm just going to take a look at the chat here just to ensure I didn't miss any questions, because Katie just stepped away. Do we have a template for an agreement between realtor and client that would protect the bidding realtor in the event the home was purchased but the client backed out after? I don't have a template, but we have seen it done. We might be able to dig up one. We have definitely talked to agents who have done that. It's possible. I think actually a couple of our own agents might have done that. So let me dig up the question. Sorry, I kind of skimmed through it. The question was, do we have a template that will be something a realtor can send their client to protect them because they want to bid on behalf of their client but don't want to get screwed? It's a fair question. I think it really just needs to be simple, just with a couple of key points that just say that your client's not going to back out. But let me see what we can dig up. Reach out to us after the webinar, and we can try to get something to you. Absolutely. Beyond that, I'm trying to think if there's any other questions I didn't cover. Is there anything else you've seen that? I don't think so. I'll open it up to questions right now. I will talk. I didn't really fully talk about how pre-bidding works. So if you're on the site right now, the pre-bidding works exactly the same as the bidding. So you could put a maximum number in right now. Let's say you put $1 million there. When the auction opens, it's only going to open at the minimum number you need to be in the lead. So I can tell you very clearly, the reserve price is not a wild number. I mentioned that earlier. If you bid $1 million, the auction's not going to open at $1 million, but it will open at the reserve price, or at the highest of the pre-bids that have come in above the reserve price. And so that's something I do encourage people to do. I think there's a lot of mind games, and I get it, even with online auctions, that I'm going to wait till the last possible second to place a bid. You don't need to pre-bid unless you already know what you want to come in at. There's no cost to doing that, but it is a binding bid when you make a pre-bid right now. So if you're still considering participating in this auction, but looking at properties between now and then, don't do anything until you know you want to place a bid. But once you do, we don't see anything, nobody sees anything until the auction opens at 5 o'clock on Wednesday, and you'll just be set to go. The same thing goes once the auction has begun. 5 o'clock on Wednesday, there's no sense waiting until 10 to 8 for the auction to come close to a close, because A, you're protected by your maximum bid anyway. So if you know what your number is, just put the maximum in. You can go to the minimum that's there if you'd like, but you can be protected and not have to be watching it. But also because the auction is not going to close at 8 if people are all bidding at the last minute anyway. So we do usually see a spread of participation depending on how many people are participating in the auction. Some people like to bid right when it opens. Some people will bid before it starts. And sometimes there's a handful who are still going to wait until the end, even though it really doesn't give you a competitive advantage at all. One more thing is, just by registering either with a basic account or a bidder account, it doesn't obligate you to bid either. Okay. So just because you create a bidder account, you're not going to be forced to place a bid. And that is mostly because the price might go beyond where you're comfortable going. So we're not going to force you to bid. If your maximum is $710,000 and the bid is at $715,000, just because you have a bidder account, we're not going to force you to go at 717 or better. It just means you get to walk away. And that's another nice thing about this is, I know we're not in the world we were in pre-COVID, where we're all waiting outside an office or in our cars to be called to see how we're doing. But it's even now when you're waiting for that call from an agent about, did I get it? Is there a second round? What's happening? Best and final, all that stuff. None of that applies here because you're going to see the number. You're going to make the decisions based on your comfort level, and you can keep going as long as you like until you've reached that point where you've either won it or it's become too expensive for you. So that is the full story of auctions. Again, check out this particular auction. If you go to otbauctions.com, it'll bring you to our homepage. That's where you can see this auction. If you haven't yet booked a showing for the property, it is on MLS. It's listed the conventional way. Please book a showing through Broker Bay if you're a realtor. If you don't have a realtor, you can definitely book showings through the site itself if you'd like. And we do intend and hope to have lots more auctions that continue through the course of the year. It's a really fun process. You are able to watch the auction. That's another question we get. If you're not participating, you're not banned from seeing the price in real time. Everybody can watch. We usually do have hundreds of people logged in just watching the ticker, curious what's going to happen. That's great. We invite you to come see that. None of the information is meant to be hidden from anybody. And that's it. So I think we have no more questions, which is great. Thanks to everybody who has participated. You can reach out to us, Katie or I. The easiest if you email us, info@getontheblock.com, or Daniel@getontheblock.com, Katie@getontheblock.com. You'll reach us right away. But you probably have our contact info already. So we look forward to hearing from you. We look forward to seeing you at the auction. Thanks for joining us, and have yourself a great Monday.